It's just dangerous because we end up without instruments which provide privacy, security for finance for individuals, and no matter what kind of individual, or your scientist, or your journalist, or your activists, or your politicians, because today you're in the government, tomorrow you are opposition, and this exactly can be used against you, your family members, to destroy you.
Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Bitcoin Equity Talks. Today, I have with me an unusual guest. Lyudmila, can you please present yourself? Because I'm sure you're going to do a better job than I, from your extensive and diverse background into activism and Bitcoin in general.
Sure. Thank you, first of all, for having me. So I'm human rights defender, originally from Ukraine, and I'm Bitcoin advocate, person who actually experience on myself, my family members, my organization, volunteers, lawyers, accountant. What does it mean? Live in the very heart of Europe and being financially excluded because of weaponization of banking data. The reason why my banking data was weaponized is because I was very active and successful in releasing political prisoners. I'm doing it for 15 years together with my team of Open Dialogue Foundation. We defend those people who politically persecuted in post-Soviet Union, but also many other countries. Like now we basically collect testimonials of those who financially repressed from all over the world, or those who were victims of abuse of Interpol, extradition requests, mutual legal assistance requests, the most complicated cases globally. And we succeed to reform Interpol. We have right now remedies against abuses of these instruments, but we understand that regimes, authoritarian regimes, are able to crush everyone who's living in democracies with abuse of anti-money laundering, counterterrorism regulation. They're doing it successfully domestically, but the most dangerous thing that they're able to do it transnationally. So in every democratic countries, abusing financial action task forces recommendation, especially travel rule.
Okay, you went like very broad and very detailed straight away. Just to take a little bit step back. So the Open Dialogue Foundation that you preside, what is it exactly?
It's foundation. It's non-profit organization. We basically supported by private people, private business people. More than 14,000 of people actually donated for us for our cause. We don't get funds from states, but at the same time we hold accountable states for violating of human rights, and we doing it analyzing regulations. We at the same time a platform for those people who financially or just normally like normal cases, like normal for us as the human rights defenders, if they are prosecuted for political reasons. For example, activists criticize the government, journalists, judges, prosecutors, entrepreneurs, for example, those who refuse to cut off internet for peaceful protesters because of the request of the government. And this is normal practice when governments, when they want, authoritarian governments, when they want to repress people, they want to eliminate information about human rights violations. So they put pressure on entrepreneurs to cut off communication, internet, telecommunication. And if these people refuse, they quite often repress their family, taken as the hostages. So what is the difference between Open Dialogue Foundation and many other organizations that we defend, let's say holistically, those actors who defend the rule of law and democracies in their countries? And we were able and successful thanks to support of members of democratic parliaments. Basically, it's G7 countries, EU, US, Canada, UK, even Australia. They supported those people who were persecuted for political reasons, and they were released. The way how we're doing it, we ask to include names of those who politically persecuted in trade agreements between democracies and authoritarian regimes. And then, because all authoritarian regimes care only about money and trade, they forced to release those people. And this is the reason why me and my organization were at some point in 2018 persecuted. There was coordinated attack three authoritarian regime. At the time, it was Moldova during Plahotniuc time, oligarch Plahotniuc time, Kazakhstan, and also Poland since 2015 until last year, October. Law and Justice Party was one of the main, basically, authoritarian regime in Europe, prosecuting every single person who was criticizing this regime. And we became a platform as an Open Dialogue Foundation for those voices on international platforms. For example, in parliaments in EU, like Bundestag. In France, it's, for example, Parliament Assembly of Council of Europe, and many other platforms. And the regimes were very much upset about it, and they tried to fabricate criminal cases against me, my organization, my family members. But also they use AI, artificial intelligence, to spread as much as possible disinformation campaign. And in my case, this information campaign was in more than 20 languages. And of course, it affects my financial rights, my right to have banking services in Europe. So at some point, four main banks, which the only one who provides services for NGOs like me in Belgium, they terminated our bank accounts. They basically closed our accounts because we are too high cost compliance cost for them clients. And for example, national parliaments or, for example, even governments, states claim that I'm national interest for them, and they supported me. My case was discussed in media, and the same presidents also defend me. For example, President Macron, President of Germany, they supported me. And with all of this support, with all this political protection, I was not able to protect my financial data and my data of my organization, our donors, our recipients of the funds, were weaponized by three authoritarian regimes. What does it mean, weaponized, you may ask? And imagine banking data, it's just your roadmap, right? It's what you're doing every day, where you buy your groceries, where you go to cut your hair. So if regime want to find out how to liquidate you, even in democracies physically, they don't need to pay to detective services. They just need to obtain, without having no remedies to protect your banking data, your financial data, your banking data, and go after you. They can fabricate criminal case against you. They can destroy your business. They can actually eliminate you physically. And this is what they tried to attempt to do in Belgium with my friend and also lawyer of Open Dialogue Foundation, LYUDMYLA. Luckily, special services of Belgium were able to identify people who wanted to kidnap her, and right now these people sentenced in Belgium. 3 people, but not everyone is lucky like she, because it's not that obvious that special services or police will recognize these so sophisticated ways how authoritarian regimes able to get your banking data and go after you to liquidate you, even in democracies. So it's very dangerous, and this is the reason why we started to use Bitcoin, being financially excluded, not only to resist against those attacks, but also hold accountable those regimes, because in order to defend yourself, you need to have money, you need to pay to lawyers, you need to be able to exist, pay your bills, rent, apartment, and everyday life expenses. But the most important thing, what we also try to do, is to educate other activists. In majority of this world, it's authoritarian regime. I have a map and front just back on me, and if you look in the map, you just imagine that we live in small bubble. And this small bubble is European countries in US, Canada, UK, where Australia, where you actually have these rights more or less protected. In majority of the world, you have no rights. Your rights are violated. And financial institutions, banks, insurance companies, they became an arm in the hands of dictators to silence and prosecute ordinary citizens, those who support, for example, peaceful protests, or who won't even donate $1 to support families of political prisoners. It's impossible to fundraise in those countries. It's impossible to hold accounts. It's impossible anything. And those people who just provide services, they also became a victim for political persecution. And in all of these countries, Bitcoin right now is the only tool you can use. And it's only peer-to-peer transactions. You cannot use crypto asset services providers, exchanges, because those exchanges, the same like banking system, has to give all your data to dictators. And it means they will immediately go against donors, recipients of the funds. And this is a question what we regularly ask in financial units or financial action task forces in many countries, democracies, how they going to protect people's lives and rights when those people are financially excluded because of political reasons or because they high cost compliance for financial institutions. and they should exist. Right now, it's impossible to live in many countries without having bank account. And there is no answer for the moment. So this is the reason why we started to defend Bitcoin in front of regulators and explain why we shouldn't have overregulation of freedom technology, why there should be reconsideration, because right now we see in AML regulation negative wording towards to self-hosted wallets, peer-to-peer transactions as a high-risk transactions. And it's a matter of time when regimes will use it against those who support human rights, humanitarian aid in many countries. And we definitely don't want it. We want EU regulators, US regulators listen to us, provide us mechanism how we can use freedom technology without threats to investors, without threats to developers, without threats to those who end users, or even giving us donations, so we afterwards can transform them in Bitcoin and deliver humanitarian aid or support human rights in countries where financial institutions just an arm for authoritarian regimes.
You mentioned that as an activist going against authoritarian regimes, you have a lot of difficulty to be financially banked, basically. Can you share with us a little bit of the stories? Like you mentioned that it was difficult for you to obtain a bank account. At the same time, your financial data was weaponized. Can you explain a little bit what happened there and what are the difficulties for an activist like you to deal with the banking system?
So until 2018, I was just doing a regular, let's say, regular activity, and my life was pretty much the same as the majority of citizens of EU or any kind of democratic countries. I had a lot of bank accounts. I enjoyed, living almost not using cash. So, and when in 2018, one after one bank accounts were terminated in Belgium, I was asking myself, what's happening? Why it's happening? And no one from lawyers, no one from financial institutions trying even to explain it. So lawyers were basically blocked because of AML, CFT provisions. And the same was financial institutions. They have kind of right not to explain why they closed my bank account. So from being a person who was living comfortable life using several credit cards, bank accounts to transact, I end up with €5 in my because how many of us right now keep cash right at home? I don't think that there are a lot of people. So I used this privilege at the time, and end up that my bank accounts were frozen or terminated one after one. And we tried to sue Belgian banks to defend our rights. And at that time, judge said that you need to try better. You need to find other bank. The bank have right to terminate your services on existing regulation. We brought this decision of the court to members of Belgian Parliament, members of European Parliament, European Commission, different interparliamentary institution, and asked question. So my case. I mean, I said them that there are three authoritarian regime going after me just because of my human rights work. You know that all of this case is politically motivated. And we provided all, for example, decisions of the court which confirm that all accusations in spread in the media, they are false accusations. For example, we even have decision, imagine, that Deputy Minister of Special Services of Poland, who repeated all these false accusations, calling me that I'm money laundering my organization, the same that we serve Russian oligarchs, or any kind of oligarchs, that we're Russian spies, that we MI6 spies, George Soros spies, just Brussels spies. Like there was a lot of contradiction in this information. But if you look into the reasons why there are so many contradictory accusations, they were addressing certain category of people who were supporting us, because we work with everyone who defends human rights. And we don't care what kind of political groups or what kind of political party you support. And the reason why regimes used all possible accusations, they wanted to destroy everyone or discourage everyone who supported our organization. And that's why they played with all of this, very obscure and sometimes unbelievable accusation, because people just try to analyze, process this information. It takes time. During this time, you don't have support. And this is what regimes want. They want to paralyze you. They want to cut off you from financial resources, from human support, and then it's easy to destroy you. So in this situation, of course, we were like maybe advantage comparing to other many people who financially excluded was that I saw it many times how it's happened domestically in authoritarian regimes, right? So the same tactics what we used to defend people there, we used in our case. We brought all of these arguments, we well documented them, and we brought them to all institutions. We also met with members and representatives of financial intelligence units and financial action task force, both in Europe and in US, asking them questions. Do you have any remedies? How you going to actually provide protection against abuse and weaponization of banking data? From being people, like what was my case showing, in the very heart of Europe, in Brussels, in Belgium, with all possible political support, you end up with no banking account, and it's very scary that even people like me who have this support, end up without bank account, and even make it even more, I would say, outrageous. We have specific decision of Belgium government and ombudsman, which asked bank in Belgium to provide us services as organization, as Open Dialogue Foundation. And imagine, bank just refused to provide these services, again claiming that they have the right to do so based on anti-money laundering counterterrorism regulation. So they don't provide you any more explanation, just reference to this regulation. And we think it's very dangerous precedent because it's very easy then to destroy business. It's very easy then to authoritarian regimes to go after data of all politicians, journalists, any kind of people, for example, scientists, and actually destroy them financially. Because how are you going to survive in this world if you don't have financial tools and means to exist, right? And for this reason, Bitcoin is extremely important. And it's for this reason extremely important to defend specifically peer-to-peer transactions when you use self-hosted wallets and you control your money. It should not be classified like right now it's happening as a suspicious operation when you operate, for example, exchange plus self-hosted wallets or high-risk transactions. It's just dangerous because we end up without instruments which provide privacy, security for finance for individuals, and no matter what kind of individual, or your scientist, or your journalist, or your activists, or your politicians, because today you're in the government, tomorrow you are opposition, and this exactly can be used against you, your family members, to destroy you.
But I really like the fact that what you're describing is like the difficulty living in Brussels to have a bank account because you're a political activist against not the Belgian government, but
No.
authoritarian regimes. But it makes it even much, much harder for activists living in these authoritarian regimes to have a bank account and to have like a normal financial life, which brings Bitcoin as a freedom technology, and you're a proponent of that. But I wanted to ask you is, don't you feel like, before, if Bitcoin didn't exist, we have lived for a lot of years with the banking system and the authoritarian regimes that are repressive through the banking system, through sanctions, and through all kind of measures, financial measures. And the problems that you're addressing have never been solved, and there is no intention to solve it. How do you explain it? Because is it like they put you in the same as the criminals bucket, and since you are like 1% of this whole bucket, they don't care because 99% of the criminals are in this bucket, so they're happy to put you there and not give you a separate treatment? Or is it people don't care about activism? I don't know, like how do you explain, like, before Bitcoin arrival, why this problem wasn't addressed?
Mm-hmm. So it's a very interesting question. First of all, we need to remind that this amount of financial repression basically started quite relatively, I would say, not, it was around 10, 15 years ago, like with this massive, massive repression. Basically, one of the key points when it started to spread in such massive way, it was after 2011, when there was narrative after what's happened in the US was used by Kazakhstani, Turkish, and many other regimes to oppress dissidents inside the country and call them forcibly as an extremist or terrorist. So
Like
this
the
was
Patriot Act was the inspiration for all these authoritarian regimes. That's what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. Yes. Then African countries and many other, China is also using it, abusing it all the time. So there was not that much practice. So we were not recording as a human rights organization even so much information where this anti-money laundering counterterrorism regulation was used for such scale. There are, of course, examples, but not on such scale. For example, right now in Kazakhstan or in Turkey, it takes minutes to block your bank account or any fundraising campaign for thousands, hundreds of thousands of people with pretext money laundering, preventing money laundering or counterterrorism regulation. Or right now
Yeah,
they also use it.
but this is like what you describe as a problem. People see it as a normal practice. I mean, even in Canada, when there was this truck riots, the Canadian government stopped thousands of truckers' bank account and financial freedom. So nobody complained. It's not like the government was overtopped or they lost the next election. As if people just don't care, like, okay, they can seize it when
No, I'm
somebody's
not agree with you.
making
There's
trouble.
not complaint. I met a lot of Canadian, and I spoke also with Canadian parliamentarians.
Yeah,
They
but it
not
didn't
only
change
complain.
the ballots. You know what I mean? It's not like there are people who complain, but it didn't like topple Trudeau. Right?
It
It
takes
stayed in
time
office.
sometimes to societies to understand it. I think the next election in Canada will change quite a lot. It's the same like in Poland. In Poland, 2 times Law and Justice Party, which was violating rights and rule of law systematically, were winning election. But last election in October, they lost. It doesn't mean that they could not win the next election, because it doesn't mean that they would not use propaganda and enormous resources they have in their hands. You need to remember that when you fight with the state, your resources always limited, and state abuse, travel rule, and many other interstate mechanisms to prosecute you, to destroy you. And this endless trust, which equals financial institutions or any kind of institutions like prosecutor officers, financial intelligence units of authoritarian regime, and those countries who are democracy or became hybrid state because of violation of rule of law. It's very difficult. It takes time, enormous amount of consistency and resources to expose human rights violation and defend your rights. And for this reason, it's so important to document everything. It's very important to build coalition. And this is the reason why we don't fight as an Open Dialogue Foundation, as a lone organization, but we bring cases documented from all over the world, showing example that it's systematic actually abuses of transnational repression tool when we speak that it's possible for regimes to have impact on judicial system, financial system, undermine freedom of speech, freedom of movement, rights or financial rights of individuals living on democratic soil, just because they're able to bribe someone, to abuse some mechanism, interstate cooperation, or even abuse trust, like travel rule, using financial institutions from their countries to get all banking data or all information about you in democracies. So it has very broad and very, I would say, undesirably rich in instruments for authoritarian regimes to have impact on our societies. And what we see right now is human rights organization and coalition. We call it Building True Change Coalition, actually a number of organizations and individuals, also Bitcoiners, developers, representative financial institutions, who against abuses of anti-money laundering counterterrorism regulation, because it was created to combat with money laundering, with oligarchs who is using their financial institutions in the country domestically and internationally. But in fact, if you see in the practice right now, all oligarchs, if they want to defend their rights, have financial services in for example, Europe or US, they will hire the highest possible ranking lawyer company, and compliance of financial institutions will allow them to hold account because they generate revenues for them. And for example, such organizations like me or opposition activists, judges living abroad, for example, from Turkey or Russia or other countries, they would not be able to hire these high cost lawyers and defend their rights. They don't generate revenue. So they will be financially excluded. So right now we see a trend, unfortunate, that AML CFT regulation especially became even more strict in recent years, doesn't actually execute the main purpose to prevent those bad actors to be to hold accountable. They enjoy an accountability, while those who uncover the human rights violation, they unfortunately financially excluded, and everyone around every basically European citizen or US citizen, UK citizen, they have no remedy, they have no clue how to protect their financial data against these kind of abuses.
Okay, so Bitcoin for you is a freedom technology against this problem of financial exclusion from in your situation and in all activist situation. But when you talk about how we should regulate Bitcoin, you can say you claim that it is a freedom technology to allow activism all over the place to be funded, to operate, to have like financial freedom for people who are trying to change or topple authoritarian regimes. But at the same time, you need to put regulations that fights money laundering, terrorism financing, and all the backed actors. And it was very hard to find a rule that applies to you that is permissive to what you're doing, and that would be non-permissive to what criminals are doing. How do you see it, like in terms of regulation, a situation in which, like, we promote activism but we forbid criminal activities?
First of all, what we have to remember and keep always in memory, that right now we see in trend where European and democracies in general countries, they try to give police functions to financial institutions. Not tried, in many cases they already given. And this is a very risky operation. Why? Because, of course, I understand and I fully support that we need to combat illicit activities and money laundering and so on. But we need to think and to see what is the source of majority of money laundering. It's again authoritarian regime, which is majority of the world, of the countries. So you can combat and you can make it even stricter regulation, and you can, make extremely transparent all banking data of all EU citizens. This is what we are coming for, unfortunately, with upcoming AML6 regulation. But then the question is, how are you going to protect this banking data not to be abused, not only by authoritarian regime, but by actors and basically potentially corrupt people by authoritarian regimes in Europe? For example, to eliminate someone who is criticizing or who is trying to expose Russian oligarchs, or, for example, evasion sanctions and so on. So those people became extremely vulnerable, no matter what kind of profession they are. They are journalists, or they are politicians, or they are official members, or they are activists, or they are entrepreneurs.
So what you mean is that even for people who are in the Western countries, they can be targeted by authoritarian regime by posting articles about them, like
Of course.
in your case,
Of course.
for claiming false things that you have done. And then the compliance officer of the Western bank will pop up an alert internally and then will exclude you.
Yes, because they basically will be automatically collected by compliance AI. So all financial institutions all over the world, they will be included in financial special databases, and you quite often not aware about it. And exclude yourself from this database almost impossible. Even if you succeed to exclude yourself, it was already copied and shared with other financial data services and bases, and there is no protection for you. And I know it's on my own example how you're going to get your financial services afterwards. While I'm saying that Bitcoin is a freedom tool and freedom technology, it doesn't mean that there is no problems with this. It's not easy to use. And this is the reason why we work with developers to explain them what obstacles and difficulties we have. Authoritarian regimes using, again, this narrative, for example, of G7 countries communique, where peer-to-peer transactions with use of crypto assets identified or classified as a high-risk transactions. And right now, this rhetoric was unfortunately placed as a negative label in anti-money laundering regulation in EU. They use this to go after brokers who actually provide services, peer-to-peer transactions. Exactly. So it's harder, for example, to do peer-to-peer transactions in such country like Nigeria or Kazakhstan because they automatically claim people who come doing this kind of activity as money launderers. And for us, it means that it's harder to defend these people on international level because just because activists were changing money with someone in the cafeteria, peer-to-peer transactions, they automatically became so-called money launderers. And we have difficulties to bring these cases. There is a political ground why they arrest specifically this person, right, who helped to exchange Bitcoin for cash. But it's more difficult for us as human rights organization to defend those people in, for example, EU institutions, because they say, look, but we also look at peer-to-peer transactions, the high-risk transactions, or, for example, suspicious transactions. And this is why it's so important to change this narrative. It is why it's so important to collect testimonials and expose cases of financial exclusion, both in democracies in EU, but also in authoritarian states, to show in these abuses.
Yeah, I hear you out, but the dynamic that I have been seeing from the financial world and from the crypto regulation world is, I call it the rise of the compliance officer. It's like the compliance officer is the new king and the new rule settler, and always more compliance makes a unanimous agreement rather than less compliance. So this trend,
because
you
it's
can
allowed.
find it.
Because it's allowed. Because no one try right now to actually, not like no one. A lot of NGOs, I have to say, right now doing consultations with financial action task forces. The problem that still these consultations happen on the closed doors, and we don't have support from industries, not from financial institutions or any kind of, because it's real, it affects every industry. And what it's brought, it's actually brought absolutely de-risking and destroying economy in the EU and other democracies, because when your compliance is higher than your ability to do business, and it basically kills in the very beginning when you want to start business, of course, we cannot expect any development. Of course, we would not expect more jobs. Of course, we will not expect that competitiveness of democracies will be higher than authoritarian regimes, because authoritarian regimes would be able to use all your knowledge, all your technology against you. And this is why we say that it's so important to reconsider, to reform anti-money laundering regulation. And this is the reason why we ask industry representatives join our coalition, expose as much as possible how anti-money laundering regulation, high compliance, not justified when it's actually, when it works, okay, we need to see figures, numbers, how it works. We need to see how it actually, unfortunately, works against many industries, and then bring open discussion about this. More silence will bring more difficulties and more, like financial action task forces or European Commission like to say, false positives. We are not false positives. We are real lives. We are real businesses. We are real people whose lives destroyed with abuse of anti-money laundering regulation. There should be remedies.
I agree, but I feel like it's a fight against such a big wave. There's another statistic that I have there is a statistic that I have read. I don't know the source exactly, but it was a calculation about how much all the anti-money laundering procedures have cost in the world and how much money they seized, and it was like 0.2%
Exactly.
or something like that. So
That's why I
even
was
just
saying.
from an economic perspective, all this over regulation of all these compliance layers that have been put in place doesn't make any sense because it's costing you more than what you're capturing, but at the same time keeps adding up. It keeps like,
Because it's allowed, because no one stands up, because
and it
there
is
is no voice of industry.
and it is allowed. You can raise your voice to revert this, but it is allowed because us human nature, like deep inside, if you take a vote, okay, you take 10 people and you ask them, do you want more control over money laundering, or do you want less control over money laundering? So we have these activists, which represent 1% of the population, have financial freedom. They're gonna 99% of them say we want more control of money laundering. So
Again, I think it's, if I may interrupt you, I think again, it's just because there is no public discussion about it. If you look into media, no one tried to question these articles of journalists. Of course, if it's just us, like activists, few activists without support of industry would do it, it will be hard to succeed and to have sustainable results. But if we join efforts, everything is possible. Look, we fighting with dictators jointly and we have results. Here in democracies, we have way more instruments. You have parliaments, you have right to vote, you have right to ask your parliamentarians, your representative, your government, what you have done to protect my financial data, how it's actually effective. There are public consultations, but you need to participate with them, not in silence mode, but actually in public mode. You need to have discussions in the parliament and show how it destroys your business. Where is actually effectiveness of this law? And if regulators and legislators doing mistakes, they should face it, and it's fine. This is why we have these democracies. But if you don't use your rights, you're gonna lose them. And this is what's happening right now. Ignorance and silence bring us to losing our financial rights, to destroying our prosperity, our role model, which was normally Western countries for other worlds. Right now, a lot of activists, they ask questions, okay, but why I should actually follow these Western countries' standards? Because your rights also violated there quite extensively. And you have no remedies how to protect yourself. What is the difference between the world you live in and mine? And with, unfortunately, this silence and ignorance, not a ability to join forces to defend your rights, there is less and less this difference. And we definitely don't want to end up living in an Orwell world where all of our rights, only exist for one side's transparency, another side hold total unaccountability. It's not the place where we see our future, I think.
yeah, for me, you're an inspiration because I'm, as the president of a regulated asset management company, I deal with compliance and anti-money laundering procedures, and they keep adding up with very little practical efficiency, and also the fines keep going up. So I really hope you succeed
I
in
would not be able to succeed if you and me join forces, just like, for example, in US, financial institutions join forces with activists. And this is the reason, for example, right now I'm in Florida. I also met with a representative for Bitcoin mining institutions, Bitcoiners. We join forces to defend our financial freedoms there in US. We need to do the same. We need to do it as a culture to defend jointly rights. If it doesn't exist in Europe, Europe is actually going to be completely de-risked with these rights. We will end up with more regulation, which will be easily abused by dictators because they are more sophisticated. They are criminals, and criminals always one step ahead because you are slow to take your decision. You think that you will be protected. Who is going to protect you if you not care about it? If you don't do one step ahead to protect your rights? So what is the result? Here we need to have joint solution where those institutions who suffer from this overregulation, they bring up this question, but jointly with activists, because we are human aspects. We prove that this regulation doesn't work as it should be, as it was intended.
So what's the next step for me to help you out in your mission?
Join us showing actually what is the actually result of regulation, how it's going to bring more people financially excluded, why you cannot develop as a business. This is the first thing. Second thing, for example, we know right now in Luxembourg that there will be at least 30,000 of people financially excluded just because they are not anymore profitable for ING Bank. And this is potential. It's just one example. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a trend in entire Europe, where all elderly people who work entire their life, pay taxes, will end up that they would not be able to do something with their money. We should have technology which allow us permissionlessly transact. Money should not become a weapon in the hands of dictators and not in the hands of those who want financially excluded, or you don't see you as a revenue. So there should be instruments for this. And we are very lucky that there was such people like Satoshi Nakamoto who gave us this tool, but we need to protect it. And who? We. It's you, me, and many other people who listen. Join our coalition. Let's have constructive plan how we can actually join efforts, go to the parliaments, speak to parliamentarians, not only in France, but also in other countries, educate them, because in the majority of the countries, parliamentarians, they want to, like journalists, they also want to have more prosperity for their people. They follow trends, but they have no data, they have no understanding that overregulation brings into destroyment of actually their countries, their societies. We need to have as much as possible voices to be representative, both end users like us, who are a human aspect, but also you as industry. When we come together, we're stronger together.
That's a great plan. I'm in. I'm
Beautiful.
gonna wrap it up here. It was a very, very interesting discussion, and for those who just discovered you, they can where can they learn a little bit more about what you're doing and all the activism and the support they could give you?
So first of all, you can go on our website, Open Dialogue Foundation, OD Foundation EU. I will happy to share with you a link on our podcast or video. And of course, you can always reach me on X or Twitter or on Damos or Noster. So on my email, I'm happy to talk to, because I'm absolutely sure that if we don't unite our forces, like, for example, a lot of communities, financial institutions and Bitcoiners, activists doing it in US, we would lose our rights in Europe. And this is the last call. We need always to remember there is only one election which differs democracy from authoritarian regime. And we saw it in Hungary, we saw it in Poland, and it can happen with every country in Europe. And you would not have tools how to protect your rights. It's very hard to fight when your financial resources basically cut off. And I think a lot of industry representatives are absolutely aware how it's easy to do right now, and there is no remedies how to protect it. So it's last moment. Or we do it, or no one is going to do it, because why they should care about our rights if we don't care, right?
Correct. Well, good luck for that, and thanks a lot for sharing all these insights. And as soon as you have anything new to share, I'm happy to have you back on the show. And it was very nice having this discussion with you, Lyudmila.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you so much.
Take care.